segment on how to get hired in an economic downturn. But first, our top story takes us to Washington, D.C., where the FMCSA is looking at rulemaking concerning Level 4 and Level 5 autonomous trucks. Our Washington correspondent, John Gallagher, is here to give us the details. John, thanks so much for being back here with us this morning.
Sure. Thanks, you guys, for having me on.
Yeah. So let's dig into it a little bit, John. FMCSA now releasing this rulemaking, open for comments. What are the first things that stick out to you?
Yeah, so it's like you said, it's coming out this morning, and it's an advanced proposed rulemaking, which it includes a series of questions on potential changes to the regulations governing the Level 4 and 5 autonomous vehicles. Those are the what is considered the highly automated and fully automated trucks that don't require to have a person in the driver's seat in order to operate them. And it's called a supplemental because it's piggybacking and supplementing an initial advanced proposed rulemaking that was issued back in 2019, and it's based. And so this one's based partly on some of the questions that arose in that one. And just to be clear on this, so the advanced proposed rulemakings are issued to help inform and formulate a full notice of proposed rulemaking. So this is steps away from actual rules, but it does provide indication of where the FMCSA is going. So this covers 3 points: notification, oversight of remote assistance, and vehicle inspection and maintenance. So with regard to notification, the main thing FMCSA is looking for or considering is whether to require that a carrier that wants to use these Level 4 and Level 5 trucks and operate them have to notify FMCSA that it wants to do so. And FMCSA is also considering requiring these carriers to submit like safety data on their safety management systems that they have in place for these trucks. And the reason it gives is it would help the agency to monitor all these operations and also step in if any safety issues arise with these trucks. It's also, FMCSA is asking for information on how many Level 4 and 5 trucks are out there now, how many there's going to be in 5 years and 10 years. So it's also using this sort of as an information gathering petition as well. So the second thing they're looking at is oversight of remote assistance. Remote assistants are apparently some of these autonomous companies have an operating model where there's going to be a person, a remote assistant who is off-site and sort of can step in on an as-needed basis if it sees something going wrong with the truck. Not like an accident type of situation, but more something like if the truck's not starting for some reason, or there's some sort of a control issue that is keeping it from operating correctly. So these assistants are off site, and they're not actually controlling like the throttle or the brake or the turn signals or anything like that. But what the FMCSA is considering doing is asking whether these remote assistants need to be subject to all the rules that a driver, the CDL driver, would need to be, like the hours of service. Should they be required to take physical examinations? Should they be required to do the whole drug and alcohol, submit their random drug testing data into the clearinghouse, that kind of thing. And the third thing is vehicle inspection and maintenance. That's obviously going to be a big challenge for these trucks for pre-trip and post-trip inspections and roadside inspections and maintenance, because you don't have a person in the wheel that can actually communicate with the state officers. So that's one of the biggest things about this. So they're asking, should these trucks be subject to different pre-trip requirements due to the actual electronics, that highly technical ADS equipment in there? Should all that be subject to these roadside inspections? What are the barriers to conducting them? How do you get over this whole communication problem? So I guess the point of this is when an actual rule actually comes out, it's going to be pretty big and pretty important when an actual notice does come out on this.
about this, and I think it's great to see that there's action coming behind a lot of the autonomous vehicles right now, or trucks I should say. With the few points here, of course the first two, especially with notifications and remote oversight, definitely being crucial and needed here, and of course vehicle inspection. Is there any kind of chance that this would potentially slow some carriers down or potentially cut a few out of the market because they just aren't quite up to standard just yet?
Yeah, I mean that's a reasonable point. That's a reasonable point, Anthony. I think that's a big reason why the FMCSA is taking such sort of a really step-by-step approach to this, having a supplemental, have the initial advance and the supplemental advance, because they're trying to iron out all these questions to help them, before they come out with a proposed rulemaking where it gets. If you iron all these issues out, like the one you just mentioned beforehand, it makes it more of a chance that an actual proposed rulemaking will move along at a certain speed, not quick, because they're never quick, but it helps to actually get a law passed. So that and other issues are going to be big. The one thing I thought about of when I'm reading this is does the FMCSA just take that first one, for example, on notification and making sure all these safety things are in place? Does the FMCSA have the expertise and the number of people that it's going to require to take care of all this, to monitor, because this is a whole new step up in trucking, where the technology is going to be such that to have proper oversight, you're going to need to have a lot of expertise. And I'm assuming that the FMCSA is going to have to make a lot of. There's going to be, and they've talked about this before. This isn't. I'm not raising any new issue here, but. It just kind of stands out even more when you think about some of the things that they're asking about and what it's going to take in terms of staffing and that, which takes money, and if they're going to have to step up the budget for the FMCSA for all these things. So they sort of started that in the last budget process. But I think it's going to require even more if they're going to go through with this. And it's one of these issues that both sides, the conservatives see this as a good thing for automation. Even Democrats and liberals see it as a good thing for safety. So it's going to be required. It's just it's going to be interesting to see how this all pans out and rolls through.
So, John, they issued the advanced notice from the FMCSA. Now, what are the next steps? Do we get public comment, and then we have the actual notice, and then public comment?
Yeah. So there would be a 45-day public comment on this advanced notice, which is sometime in March, and then after that, so they look through all the comments, they look through that, and then they use that, like I said, to kind of inform a formal notice of proposed rulemaking, which has been delayed now. They initially said, I think they were supposed to have one out in 2018 or 19, an actual notice, but it's been delayed. So the autonomous sector is been anticipating this for a long time, and so they're really interested in seeing in getting this thing going and seeing when an actual proposed rule will come out, which could be sometime mid-year or later this year.
It's going to be interesting to watch for sure, and we'll continue this conversation later on. Today we'll have Finch Fulton with us, as well as Matthew Leffler for a roundtable to talk a little bit about the legal implications. John, thank you for joining us this morning, and we'll keep an eye on it.
Sounds good. Thanks, you guys.
All right, we're going to head over to the wall. We've got Anthony Smith standing in for Tony Mulvey today. He's here for a carrier update with Johnny Gilbert.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this carrier update, first one of the morning, and I'm here with the one and only Donnie Gilbert. It's been a while, Donnie, and I'm excited.
Good morning, Anthony.
Good morning, and I see we have some ocean data here.
Yes, we're going to start off across the pond. When I'm looking at it, I'm using our container atlas.
And I've got it turned on. I've got origin China, destination U.S., all ports. So it could be East Coast, West Coast, everything. And the reason is because last week we looked at just all imports coming in the U.S. and just a little bit of China, or just coming in the to the U.S. But what's important is right now we look at and we see this little guy right here dropping down drastically. Well, there was the Chinese New Year's, and shipping is going to slow down. We have a little bit of a bump, probably pre-bump before, trying to get the ships packed out and get them on the way before that New Year's holiday where they shut down for a week happens. Of course, that holiday just ended, so we will hopefully see that start to come back up. This was last year. So you see it did drop drastically. The bump before dropped down, and they start to build back here very, very rapidly right after trying to get those ships loaded back up. So this is expected right now, but overall you still see the pattern. Imports even coming from China all the way down through December. We'll see what happens after this pull forward, we can call it. And this is going to be very important because we were one of the biggest importers from China. Right. And this is where a lot of our goods came from. As we see this economic impact hitting, this is what's going to be affected. When it maybe starts to turn around, this might be where you see it start happening first. Or, let's go to the next chart. We might see it right here, the bookings, which is pre what we just saw. This is about 8 to 10 days right now before the ship set sail. So what's going to happen first? Orders are going to be put into these factories in China. These factories are going to start pre-booking capacity on these vessels, which you'll see right here, and then the vessels will take off to leave. So right now we see bookings that were up just a little bit here right before the holidays, their holiday, and you see they're already starting to pick back up here just past the holiday. So this is another good chart here in Container Atlas to see. Again, this is set for picking up in China, delivering to the U.S. A lot of good information that'll give you information. Here we're looking probably 45 to 60 days out before these volumes ever hit the U.S.
So, Donnie, I love this thing that you're building out here because we're looking at leading indicators to near real-time indicators with volume. So this is going to be especially important, not just for those ocean operators, but for those operating domestically, right?
Yes, and here, looking at the way we are right now, we're beginning of February. A lot of the spring goods should have already shipped. So this is maybe just after spring. We see there wasn't a big increase right here, but the patio furniture, lawnmowers, etc. Those need to be on the shelves probably by the end of February. So this is a little bit late now. Those should have already shipped and hopefully be arriving here soon. So this is going to be probably some still spring stuff that will come out in April, May, but because we're 2 months ahead here. Now let's go to the next chart here. I got some a little bit interesting here. So this is the average transit time for these boats to cross the ocean. And it's funny here, we're right at this 27, 28 day mark here, right here. We're kind of in between that 25 and 30, or just above that 25. Now, back during COVID, when we were extremely busy, you can see it was down here about 22 and a half, 23 days. So here, these ships apparently, since they're probably not being loaded full out of China, they're probably going maybe hitting another port somewhere and getting more goods loaded on before they cross the sea, as opposed to probably many of these vessels were hitting it direct and coming across, which would have shortened transit time. And now that we're down here, we see that it's kind of extended some. And during some of the slowdown, we saw, even a little bit higher. So it's kind of curious to watch these, but right now the transit time's averaging about 25 days. Then you see, of course, loading the ship could take a few days, not several, but it's not like a 4-hour load for a tractor trailer. And then, of course, that 10-day period. So again, looking at this ocean data, we can see 45 to 60 days in advance.
Awesome, Donnie. Well, excited to be back with you, and we'll have more carrier updates throughout the morning. But right now, it's time for our first look at today's headlines.
Thanks, Anthony. Here's a look at the top stories on FreightWaves.com this morning. The Biden administration has announced $1.2 billion in funding to be distributed to 9 projects qualifying for a new grant program under the infrastructure bill from last year. The projects were too complex to be funded through traditional grants and include several initiatives to speed freight through major highways. There were over 100 applications for these grants, which totaled a monetary request of $30 billion. Big winners included the Brent Spence Bridge, which connects Cincinnati and Covington, Kentucky, the Oklahoma Department of Transportation, who got money for a project to improve Interstate 44, and Louisiana, who will replace a river bridge between Lake Charles and Westlake. A bill in the Iowa legislature is looking to restrict the length of freight trains operating in the state. The bill passed a 3-member subcommittee on Friday and would stop rail companies from running trains over 8,500 feet in length. The rule could cost companies between $500 and $5,000 per violation. Lawmakers and unions are actually in agreement with this rule, with unions arguing that longer trains clog up the rail network due to lack of supporting infrastructure. Federal efforts have also begun to address long trains, with the infrastructure bill requiring the Federal Railroad Administration to report train length in accident reports. And Old Dominion has announced Kevin Freeman will succeed Greg Gantt as president and CEO of the company effective July 1st of this year. Freeman has been with the LTL carrier for 31 years, currently serves as executive vice president and chief operating officer. Gantt will retire from the company but will remain on the board of directors. He led operations since 2018 under the leadership of both Gantt and Freeman. Old Dominion has added more than $2 billion to its top line and cut nearly 10% off of its operating ratio. And you can find details of these stories and so much more on FreightWaves.com and on our FreightWaves app. If you're watching us live on YouTube, like and subscribe to stay updated. And for the full FreightWaves TV experience, head on over to tv.freightwaves.com. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with our first check of weather, so don't go away. The 2023 Freight Tech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest Freight Tech news at FreightWaves.com.
Welcome to Drilling Deep. I'm your host, John Kingston. Drilling Deep is the place where we talk about oil and we talk about diesel, and you have to drill to get oil and you have to get oil to make diesel, so that's why we call it Drilling Deep. Drilling Deep drops every Friday on FreightWaves TV and all available podcast platforms.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now. It's time for our first check of the weather. And yes, we are still continuing to talk about the ongoing winter storm that is bringing really the most detrimental effects that we've seen so far across south central Texas and up into Oklahoma and Arkansas today. Let's move right into it in sonar critical events where that radar is turned on. Texas is suffering underneath some freezing rainfall right now, which looks like it's snow on the radar, but all of this is really falling as freezing rain. So we do have winter storm warnings still in place for the Austin Metro up I-35 through Waco, just to the outside of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metro, because Dallas is underneath an ice storm warning now. We've got this because we have freezing rain falling on these surfaces where the temperatures are extremely cold, and so we're getting that freezing rain and that ice accumulation out there. As if travel wasn't bad enough yesterday, it has gotten even worse today because of this ice accumulation. We've got a couple photos to show you out of Austin, Texas this morning, where we've got some of that ice accumulation. You can see that on the power lines, on the trees there. So far, they're up to about 1/4 inch of ice accumulation, and it really only takes about 1/3 to 1/2 of an inch of ice before you start to see detrimental effects like power outages and tree branches snapping off. We're already starting to see some of that. We do have some pretty sustained power outages from northern San Antonio up through Austin and into the Waco area. Same thing as you move out to the east across East Texas. Those ice storm warnings continue for central Arkansas and then up to the Memphis area. Memphis right now in kind of a dry slot, but as you can tell, we've got more precipitation on the backside headed their way. And this is going to be, again, that freezing rain mix. Maybe a little snow flurries and a couple pieces of sleet mixed in, but for the most part, it is going to be freezing rain. So that ice is going to be a big concern for Memphis today as well. Just as we talked about earlier this week, if you don't have a reason to be out on the roads today, don't go out on the roads. Expected to see this continue now through tonight into tomorrow morning, and then eventually a slow warm-up starts to end the week and start the weekend for these places. They'll get a little bit of a chance to thaw out. We'll continue to talk about the incredible cold sweeping down from the northern plains coming up later on in the show, but right now we'll toss things over to Isaiah Buchanan for a first check of what's trending on social media.
Welcome into Social Roundabout, everyone. I'm Isaiah Buchanan, and new this morning, Tom Brady says he is retiring. And I know we've heard this story before. He said it last year and ended up coming back, but this time he says it's for good. He posted a video about an hour ago on his Twitter page saying that he is done playing football. But Tom Brady is going to go down as the most decorated quarterback in NFL history. Take a listen to some of these numbers. He has 7 Super Bowls, 5 Super Bowl MVPs, 3 MVPs of the regular season. He also leads the league in passing yards for the regular season with 89,214. He is first in passing touchdowns in the regular season with 649. He's first in playoff yards with 13,000 and first in playoff touchdowns with 88. That's just a career that nobody will probably ever be able to surpass. I mean, Brady played until he's right now currently 45. And you want to know what's as rare as somebody playing football to the age of 45? How about a rare green comet that's going to be circling Earth later today? And a comet has not come this close to Earth in about 50,000 years since the last ice age. Now, it's going to come within about 26 million miles of Earth. Now, to put that into perspective, it's about 28% of the distance to the sun and still about 100 times the distance of the Earth, of the moon's distance to the Earth. Now, this will be able to be seen with the naked eye if you have the right conditions. So people in the Midwest, I'm sorry, you probably will not be able to see this comet just because of all the winter storms that are going on there. But the time that it will be most visible will be around about 6:50, 7 o'clock Eastern time tonight. So if you're interested in that, go outside, look for the comet. It's going to be available a little later tonight for you to see. And like I said, it's been about 50,000 years since a comet has come this close to Earth. That's all I have for this edition of the Social Roundabout, but we're going to have more coming up in our next hit. Right now, I'm going to toss things back over to Kaylee and Anthony.
Fortunately, stargazing opportunity is not so good for us here in the Tennessee Valley today.
Yeah, that weather.
We'll have to wait another 50,000 years, I guess.
I guess it's cryogenically frozen for me, joining Walt Disney.
All right, Isaiah, thank you for that. Right now, we're going to welcome in our next live guest. We've got our editorial director, Rachel Premack, joining us today. Rachel, thanks for being here. We talk a lot about leading indicators on this show, especially when it comes to economic uncertainties. But the leading indicator that you've written about this last week is really interesting and one that I don't think a lot of people talk about. Cardboard boxes and why they are so important as that leading indicator.
Yeah, so it's not something that even we in the logistics world, which I feel like is the master, we're always talking about, leading indicators and all that. But cardboard boxes, incredibly important. Obviously all of your online orders come in those. But also just think about basically every consumer good that you buy spends time in a cardboard box at one point or another during its, delivery and production cycle. And yeah, we've been seeing some kind of worrisome data in terms of shipments and output and demand for this crucial product.
No, Rachel, of course, one of the big things that we've seen is start to see some stabilization in our OTVR and our volumes and things like that in our near real-time data. Do you think some of this cardboard data might start to indicate that we could see maybe some weaker volumes potentially going forward in the few months here?
Yeah, so the data we're looking at is really just about the fourth quarter. So whether that speaks to, 2023, 2024 going forward, it's not quite clear yet, but executives at these box companies did say in earnings calls that are happening this week, last week, that they do anticipate demand will be lower this quarter and quarters coming forward. And it's important to keep in mind this is kind of comparing to 2021 and 2022, where consumer demand was a little hotter, was a bit more active. But right now, we are seeing some pretty concerning numbers just for the fourth quarter. Production of U.S. box shipments, U.S. box shipments fell by 8.4% in the fourth quarter. Operating rates at these box producing facilities fell to 80.9%, which is the lowest we've seen since the first quarter of 2009. So a lot of these data points we're seeing, it's the lowest we've seen since the Great Recession. So that's something that is definitely concerning for investors and people watching this space.
So is it especially concerning for that, knowing that in the times of the Great Recession, 2008, 2009, e-commerce wasn't as big of a thing, right? We weren't sitting here ordering all of our goods from Amazon. We weren't necessarily getting as many direct shipments to our door, which can that almost indicate even more of a spread in the difference and really how drastic that number of the fall is, just because the way that we're using cardboard has changed so much?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it is interesting kind of comparing this to previous years where obviously we did not have the same sort of reliance on cardboard. It's interesting because looking at the manufacturing of paperboard container, just going back all the way to the early 70s on government data, we are still down from even at the highest points of 2021, 2022, we are still down from some of the highest points in the late 90s. And early mid 90s, late 90s, those were really the times when we saw paperboard and cardboard. That was like the peak of its production, according to some of this historic government data. So even despite how much cardboard we are using with all of our e-commerce shipments, we were somehow still using more previous to this area in the 90s and early 2000s. Not quite clear why that is, but it's just kind of an interesting trend. You'd think we're at peak cardboard right now, but apparently we're not. We're still not.
And Rachel, it was a great article, and those who haven't seen it's up on FreightWaves.com right now. I think one of the most telling charts is, of course, that quarterly change where you can kind of see the percentage drop comparison to years past. One of the things that's always going to be really, critical for growth in the U.S. economy is going to be that U.S. consumer. Are we also seeing trends that are concerning for the U.S. consumer that would really kind of lead to diminish goods demand, especially for those that would be packaged up by cardboard boxes?
Yeah, it's still not quite clear where exactly this lines up, but definitely as U.S. consumers starts to buy less, starts to save more, perhaps spend more on services, perhaps they're saving more. That will all show up in how much stuff they're ordering to their doors or just buying from stores generally.
And super fascinating as well. And I'm kind of curious about the correlation between a shift towards more recyclable packaging or more reusable packaging. I think like a lot of Amazon packages now have been coming either in those poly mailers. Sometimes you get an Amazon package that's shipped just no box, no container at all, right? Like you order something that's maybe shrink wrapped and it just shows up to your door and there's your bed sheets. Is that something that we could also maybe put some correlation blame on the shortage? It's just the way that people are shipping their goods is changing?
Yeah, it's it's not clear how much of the recyclables it could be playing a role in this. You know, the executives on their quarterly earnings the last week or so have really been putting the blame on this current downturn, not so much into the interest in recyclable packaging, but more into the fact that consumer demand is just lowering. But that's definitely been one sort of proposed theory is, you know, maybe we are just getting a little bit more efficient in how we use these materials. And I think definitely when you zoom out to, you know, the last few decades, I think that could explain some of these declines in cardboard usage. But just looking at this past year or so, it seems like the downturn in cardboard usage could really just be tracked to this downturn in consumer demand.
Rachel, I think you're spot on here with that, and especially as consumer debt continues to climb and seems to almost get into this place of potentially being financially overextended, if not so already. When the executives are kind of mentioning, of course, slowdowns, were there any talks of signs of or potential expectations of a recovery?
Yeah, not quite clear when the recovery is happening, but we have, of course, seen in our own data at FreightWaves how it seems like we are getting to a bottoming out process. It seems like January or February are really kind of the times where we're seeing, you know, the lowest lows of the trucking industry. And of course, trucking along with cardboard are pretty in line with, you know, that consumer demand. So it could be that, you know, first quarter of this year, second quarter of this year could be when things, if not, you know, start to turn up again, then certainly perhaps, you know, they can't get any worse could be one potential for cardboard, just looking at trucking demand.
It's like, well, we might not be going up, but at least we're not going down any further.
Yeah, exactly.
Rachel, thank you for joining us this morning. Obviously, you write for regular articles for us on FreightWaves Now, but we also have the Modes newsletter. If people want to subscribe to that and get in contact with you, where can they go to do that?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at rrpre. Sorry, that's Twitter. At rrpre is my Twitter handle, and you can also subscribe to my newsletter at freightwaves.com/modes.
Thanks so much for being on. Always great having you here, and we'll be sure to check with you again soon.
Yeah, thank you.
No, Anthony, I think I've got at least like 5 or 10 cardboard boxes sitting in my backyard right now. But that's mostly just because my dog likes to play with them.
Oh, see, look, that's reusable, that's recyclable, that's sustainable, right?
Reduce, reuse, recycle. That's the 3 R's.
That's it. And this is going to be it for this segment, but we are going on a quick break, and we'll be right back with more FreightWaves Now.
Like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June.
Hey everybody, this is Thomas Watson, enterprise trucking carrier expert here at FreightWaves, telling you about my show, Loaded and Rolling. Now, it involves trucking topics for large carriers and even small ones that wish to be large. Anything that impacts trucking, you can get it there. You can catch us every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern on tv.freightwaves.com. We do it live.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now. Anthony, I know that you love a good chat about labor and jobs and hiring.
Yes, I do.
So yesterday, Great Quarter Gals, I had the pleasure of hosting Charlie Safro, founder and president of CS Recruiting, to talk a little bit about hiring in a saturated job market. We had a great little conversation about the value of a resume, the non-value of a cover letter, and the interesting piece of a digital footprint in getting hired. Let's check it out. I think it's super interesting to think about kind of your digital footprint as a job seeker. And obviously, like, you and I are both fairly active on LinkedIn. You and I are both regular producers of content. But even for folks who maybe don't work on the media side or who aren't regularly on a show or a podcast, if they've been on one before, you have produced now content, and that is a piece of content that you can then send to a potential employer and say, hey, look at me, pick up on my personality, pick up on my vibe just from me sitting down and doing this interview with Anthony Smith on FreightWaves Now, right? Like, that is something invaluable that I think that job seekers in the past haven't really had the opportunity for. How important is it if you are maybe a candidate who you like your role, you're kind of comfortable, but you're actively participating in these things? Should you be banking your content and holding on to that? So maybe when you do go out and look for a new job, you can provide it firsthand and be like, hey, I might not have a generic formal cover letter, but listen to how well I do in an interview.
I think that's such an awesome suggestion. And I don't think you need to bank your content in the sense that, you know, reserve it for that opportunity. Put it out there, share your thoughts, because you can always send that link from a specific post to a hiring manager. I actually think that's a really great strategy. It's almost your writing portfolio, if you will. So maybe in that introductory letter, you're referencing some of your content. Even on LinkedIn, you can easily share one of your posts with someone who may be a hiring manager over there, and, you know, very casually say, I thought that this might interest you. You could tag them on a post and get them engaged and get them and their company some attention. So I absolutely think that's a great way to just build your portfolio, showcase what you believe in, what you like to talk about. I could scroll through someone, you know, if somebody posts once or twice a week and I have an opportunity to scroll through those posts, I will learn more about that person in 3 or 4 minutes than I probably will if I sat down and talked to them for a half hour. So it's great pre-work for an interviewer. It's also great for an interviewer to review to make the decision if they want to even pursue this candidate for a first conversation. So if you've got the content, absolutely leverage it, show it off, be proud of it, and make sure that it gets the attention it deserves.
100%. It's kind of that show versus tell strategy, right? Like, I can sit down in an interview and fight to try and tell you things that are interesting about myself, or I can just show you this piece of content that I love doing. So I want to go back to that kind of point that you made about the fact that hiring organizations are kind of overwhelmed right now, right? There are more job seekers than there are jobs. And it's been this very intense flip from the trend that we saw kind of mid-2021 through the start of 2022 that's putting a lot of stress on job seekers specifically. And I think a lot of people are finding that they are throwing a lot of things out there into the ether and not getting any responses. I put up a poll last night on LinkedIn, because I've seen this on TikTok, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, where people are sending out maybe 100 resumes, probably an exaggeration, and just getting ghosted, and ask people, you know, have you been ghosted, or are you getting somewhere in between yes and no responses? Only got like 15 responses because I put it up late last night. But, you know, most people were like, yeah, I've been ghosted. I'm actively looking for a role and I keep getting 0 responses. Then about 7 of those folks were like, yeah, we're somewhere in between. I send some out, I hear back maybe, but then I don't hear back from a lot. No one said yes. They are hearing back consistently from all of their companies. What do you think about kind of this space that we're at right now? And is a lot of that to blame just based on the fact that these hiring organizations are probably overwhelmed?
I think that's a big part of it. And there's so much going on behind the scenes. So companies posting jobs for roles that they're not immediately actively hiring for is nothing new. I mean, this is something that companies have done for many years as an opportunity to just proactively build their talent pipeline. It's a way to gauge what talent is interested out there. Another thing that most job seekers don't realize is these companies have paid for those job slots on LinkedIn. So if we have 100 opportunities to post a job and we only have 97 jobs we're looking to fill, we probably will fill those 3 spots either with duplicate jobs or more of that generic job posting. Now, we're hopeful that we will help that person because of the amounts of opportunities we see versus just being one employer, but it's nothing new. Companies will take advantage of every job spot and they will post. And what we're seeing now, though, is the lack of response, the ghosting, which is a result of, one, the jobs aren't really immediately being filled and they're not really a hot role to fill. It's much more of a proactive attempt. And then 2, what I mentioned before, that these job postings are getting so many applications. And if you are applying on LinkedIn, you can usually see how many applications have been submitted. So I wouldn't say avoid submitting your resume if you see that 100 or 1,000 resumes have already been submitted, but I would say be mindful, and a job seeker should use that to manage their expectations. If you're applying to a job that has 1,000 applications that was posted yesterday, chances are, unless you are the rock star that catches their attention, you may not hear back from them. And if you do, it's probably going to be a while till they get to the end of that resume pile and can communicate with you. So there's a lot that goes into it, but it's really just important to know as a job seeker, this probably has nothing to do with you. This is more technology. It is the status on the hiring company side, and it's just their overall process and efficiency of how they review resumes.
So let's say that you get in, you haven't gotten ghosted, you go through the application process, go through the interview process, boom, you've been hired, you've been offered the job, you're getting ready to start. And now flip side, you as the now hired employee, you decide to ghost the employer because maybe you found a better opportunity or you just decide, hey, this wasn't for me. Talk a little bit about how that is an awful strategy when it comes to finding that employment, and maybe the kind of reputation that helps or that it leaves you with if you do that kind of thing when you're looking for that next job.
Yeah, you have to remember that every touch point is an opportunity to make an impression. It's an opportunity to influence, to build a relationship. So do not burn your bridges. I mean, in December, we actually saw more rejected offers than we had all of last year, which is kind of opposite of what the market is yielding. But these offers were rejected for a couple of reasons. One, candidates got cold feet. They went through the process and then they realized it was not the right opportunity. 2, candidates got counter offers. Maybe it was intentional, maybe not, but when they went to resign at their current employer, they sweetened the deal and got them to stay, and thus they rejected the new offer on the table. And then also, candidates may have multiple offers, regardless of the situation in the job market. You never know what's going on, how active these candidates are, how connected they are, how qualified they are. So it's really important as a candidate to remember, if you are in that situation, for whatever reason you are turning down a job offer, do it with integrity, do it with honesty. As a recruiter, I would much rather know you are rejecting this job because you have another job that's better because of X, Y, and Z, so I can help you in the future, so I can give my clients some honest feedback. So that's my advice, is be honest. There's nothing to lose.
Thank you all so much for joining us for this next carrier update. I'm Anthony Smith, Chief Economist here at FreightWaves, and I'm joined by the one and only Donnie Gilbert. And Donnie, we're continuing with the Freightos Baltic Daily Index.
Yeah, so we talked about shipping and pre-booking and everything in China. Now let's talk about what's going on the pond instead of crossing it. So I brought up Freightos Baltic Index, and I've done a year-to-year change. We're comparing rates this year to last year. As you can see, there's a lot of red. And basically, back during COVID, when all this was, ships were backed up at ports, et cetera, rates for containers crossing the ocean were at the highest record peak levels we've ever seen. So now we go back to what's going on now, and these rates are coming down pretty rapidly. And again, that's another sign of an ease or slowing down of orders, containers crossing the ocean, which is not a good sign. But again, we see it here. Now, these are kind of lanes. Europe to South America, down 15% year over year. Europe to North America East, down 28%. China to the Mediterranean, down 76%. A few ones that are headed up, North America going over to Eastern Europe. We've been trying to help out. We've been shipping things over there since the little to help with the war efforts. So we see some positive, but mainly a whole lot of negatives. And again, this is kind of a sign right now that of things slowing down that are coming across the ocean. When the demand for ships eases, the rates start to come down. When we start seeing these turn around, then we'll know that the rates are coming back up. So you can look these up in Sonar and kind of keep an eye on the lanes that you're interested in, probably ones coming into the U.S. or North America, and see if they start to rise, then you may understand there's more of a demand for ships coming in. Now, let's check out what's going on at the ports on the next chart here. So we're looking at this CMST data, and year-over-year change again. Port of Los Angeles right near currently from this January to last January, down 5%. New York down 26%. Savannah down 12%. So a lot of our major ports are seeing an ease in receiving goods right now as well. And I said receiving. This is what's actually going through customs when it clears customs. So obviously, if goods are slowing down, there's going to be less goods going through customs. So these are why these numbers are down. We do see some of the smaller ports, Boston, Chester, PA, Tampa, West Palm Beach. These show some signs of increase, but these are smaller ports. These are a lot of the major ones right here: Miami, Houston, Savannah, New York, Los Angeles, and these are probably the ones that we're more interested in. So again, areas to watch, but unfortunately, it shows that really more things are slowing down this January than speeding up. Next chart here, right quick, we'll look at one more. Now, this is an interesting chart right here. This is the intermodal spread. We're looking at a load that's coming in off a boat, and it's going to Chicago. Now, one route is delivering into maybe Los Angeles and coming on the train going to Chicago and being delivered, or coming all the way around maybe to Savannah, then riding the train up and delivering. So East Coast versus West Coast. Well, currently right now it's been cheaper to go by East Coast, but we've dropped across this zero line into the negatives, and it's swapped back to where the West Coast is now cheaper to ship freight than the East, or it's cheaper to ship to the West Coast and run it by train versus the East Coast. So this could have shippers start using the West Coast more now, or putting the volumes there versus the East Coast, and we could see some demand pick up on the West Coast. We need to keep an eye on that too, Anthony.
Definitely something to keep an eye on. I'll be interested to see how long this trend lasts. Donnie, thanks so much for this carrier update, and we're going to take a short break, but we'll be right back with more FreightWaves Now.
Welcome back to another edition of Check Call. Check Call. Check Call. Check Call. Let's go. Nobody works for free, so why should we be expecting our drivers to? Okay, let's just get it together now. What are some of those proactive steps that you can start taking now? For myself, I would like the Earth to still be here for a little bit longer, but is a hot dog a sandwich?
Oh, okay. Is pizza an open-faced sandwich? It's bread.
I have been ready for this question. I've seen the show.
We're all in this together.
Thanks for making me hungry. Now I want a hot dog.
You're welcome. Catch episodes of Check Call Tuesdays at 12:30 on FreightWaves TV. Keep up with all things Check Call on freightwaves.com/checkcall. See you on the internet.
What does this have to do with freight? Well, I'm glad you asked. People are wondering what's going to happen with inflation. Is there going to be hyperinflation? When is hyperinflation going to be here? When is there going to be inflation? What's going to happen with inflation? Inflation. This is the sexiest topic within the economy right now.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now. It's time for our second check of the weather. And of course, we were talking about the winter storm that's continuing to wreak havoc across southern Texas, but not to be understated is the bitter cold that's dropping in behind that storm. Even though the coldest temperatures are not going to reach down into Texas, they're going to settle right above Oklahoma into Kansas. We're still going to be seeing some extreme cold through the next 2 days or so. Let's check it out in Sonar Critical Events. These are our minimum surface temperatures forecast from day 1 to day 3, so from today in through your Friday morning. And what we're going to be watching is this extreme intrusion of cold air coming down out of Canada. Coldest place is going to be northern Minnesota into Wisconsin and northern Iowa, of course. These are going to be your lows down into the -40s, -50s in some spots. North Dakota, South Dakota into Iowa, you're going to be seeing lows in the -teens to -20s. And then further down, that will be well underneath freezing for us here for lows, starting off tomorrow on into your Thursday and Friday. And with that, we're going to see some other spots where certain areas are going to dip down into that cold range as well. One spot today in Utah where the temperature was -62. That was wind chill temperature. So not only we're looking at the cold temps, the wind chills are going to be extreme as well. So because of that, we do have some wind chill warnings in place across Montana into the Dakotas and then southward into Nebraska, Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin as well. They're a little bit more used to the cold because of course they live up in the north, but still this is the dangerous levels of cold that we're going to be seeing here in the next few days. As far as looking down into Texas, this is where we're going to be worried about the ability to see all this frozen precipitation melt or not. Our low is going to be settling down into the teens and mid-20s. High is going to be settling right at that freezing line for the next 2 days. So we're going to be looking at temperatures right around 30 to 32 degrees. Not going to give all of that frozen precipitation a good chance to melt in the next few days, which means that they're just going to get stuck for a little bit longer. We'll talk a little bit more about the impacts from that ice storm coming up later on in our next hour. Right now, though, we'll toss things back over to Isaiah for our next look at the social roundabout.
Welcome into Social Roundabout, everyone. I'm Isaiah Buchanan, and Kaylee just got finished wrapping up talking about the winter storm out in the Midwest. And this video from Dallas shows an issue that people were having out on the roads. People were sliding all over the place, going across a bridge. And it really, I mean, just look at this car right here sliding. Luckily, it comes to a stop, not too much damage, but others were not as fortunate. This car right here actually gets really lucky, goes the whole bridge and does not hit the side at all. Very fortunate, but like I said, some of the others were not as lucky. You're gonna see some trucks and other vehicles that were starting to slide across the bridge and end up hitting the wall, getting a little bit of damage to their car. You know, bridges do tend to ice quicker than the actual roadways. So if you are out in the Midwest and you are on the roads, just make sure that if you're driving across any bridges or anything like that, that you are taking your time and being very cautious, because you could end up in a situation like this where you start to slide and potentially get into a wreck. Switching things up a little bit, new this morning, football legend Tom Brady has announced that he is he's stepping away from the game of football. He posted a video on his Twitter account this morning saying that he is retiring, and this time for good. He did announce a retirement last year, but ended up coming back like, I think, 40-something days later. So not really a true retirement. But Tom Brady is probably the greatest quarterback. I don't think there's anybody that you could really put up there with him. He has all of the stats that you would want as a quarterback. He's first in several categories, including passing yards with over 89,000. Passing touchdowns, both of those are in the regular season. He has 649 regular season touchdowns. 13,000 playoff yards, which is number 1 in the NFL, and 88 playoff touchdowns, which is also number 1 in the NFL. You can't forget the 7 Super Bowls, the 5 Super Bowl MVPs, and the 3 regular season MVPs. He has had an historic career, and I wish him the best in his retirement. That's all I have for this edition of the Social Roundabout, but right now I'm going to toss things back over to Kaylee and Anthony.
Tom Brady might be good, but he is not the GOAT of New Mexico State.
That has to go to Chris Williams. He was an amazing wide receiver. And I don't know if this is just me, but I want to see Brady come back for another year.
Nah.
Or maybe even a year after that.
We're done. Let it die. Let it die.
One more year.
No. Speaking of things that are the greatest of all time, how about the greatest virtual event of all time? Global Supply Chain Week coming to us here at FreightWaves in just a little under a month now. February 20th through the 24th, we'll be watching 5 full days of content, everything from ocean to air to diesel to energy to fuel to all of the above. And you can win some pretty great prizes too.
That's right. There's going to be a giveaway every single day at this event, and you don't have to do anything crazy to get it. All you have to do is just get registered, and you'll be eligible for this giveaway.
That registration is free, as it is with all of our live virtual events. So you can head on over to live.freightwaves.com and enter your information for the chance to win and get excited about this Global Supply Chain Week. While you're there, plan out your agenda for the rest of the year as well. Maybe look at buying your future of supply chain tickets, because before you know it, those prices are going to increase. And rumor has it that Ohio, Cleveland has a little more hotel rooms than Chattanooga, but I don't really know. I don't know either, but I know I'm excited to be there, and I'm going to be excited for F3. That's going to be the event of the year. So as Kaylee said, be sure to get your calendars in order. We're going to take a short break, but we'll be right back with more FreightWaves Now.
When guests come to an event like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June. Welcome back to FreightWaves Now, starting off your 10 a.m. hour with a look at your top stories from this morning. A bill in the Iowa legislature is looking to restrict the length of freight trains operating in the state. The bill passed a 3-member subcommittee on Friday, would stop rail companies from running trains over 8,500 feet in length. The rule could cost companies between $500 and $5,000 violation. Lawmakers and unions are in agreement with this rule, with unions arguing that longer trains clog up the rail network due to a lack of supporting infrastructure. Federal efforts have also begun to address long trains, with the infrastructure bill requiring the Federal Railroad Administration to report train lengths and accident reports. Old Dominion has announced Kevin Freeman will succeed Greg Gant as president and CEO of the company, effective July 1st of this year. Freeman has been with the LTL carrier for 31 years, currently serves as executive vice president and chief operating officer. Gant will retire from the company but will remain on the board of directors. He led operations since 2018, and under the leadership of both Gant and Freeman, Old Dominion has added more than $2 billion to its top line and cut nearly 10% off of its operating ratio. Daimler Truck says that it created capacity to build 2,000 Class 8 battery electric trucks last year, but saw sales fall flat due to a lack of charging infrastructure for its builds. CEO John O'Leary said that they had in mind a market demand that was going to be stronger than it was. And after ensuring capacity, customers started to ask for those builds to be delayed. Early adopters like Schneider, UPS, and Cisco, who placed orders for hundreds of vehicles, ended up with just a few second-generation trucks instead. Ocean Network Express saw a significant deterioration in profit for its fiscal year 2022 third quarter, with a 50% drop quarter over quarter. Q3 profits were $2.76 billion, down from $5.52 the quarter prior, and down $2.12 billion year over year. The group blamed the dive on a rapid reduction in the short-term freight market and cited a demand decrease in the east to west trade because of elevated inventory levels in North America. Cargo volume from Asia to North America was down 19% year over year in October and November for the company. And FedEx has announced e-commerce shipping platform Shippo was awarded a first-of-its-kind platform account with the carrier, a move that will allow Shippo to offer discounted FedEx shipping services to the U.S.-based merchants on its platform. The services include offerings under FedEx Ground Economy and FedEx International Connect Plus, which will let the carrier reach more small to mid-market e-commerce sellers. The companies did not disclose the size of the discounts, only that Shippo merchants will receive perks like 24-hour package visibility, insurance coverage up to $100, and the ability to use their own custom shipping boxes. And you can find details of these stories and so much more on FreightWaves.com and on our FreightWaves app. Give us a like and subscribe if you're watching us live on YouTube, and tv.freightwaves.com for anything you might have missed during this week. Right now, we're going to toss things back over to Anthony and Donnie for our next carrier update.
Hello and welcome back to the Carrier Update. I'm Anthony Smith, Chief Economist here at FreightWaves, and I'm joined by the one and only Donnie Gilbert. And Donnie, looks like we have some diesel up on the chart.
Yes, so here in the blue line, I've got our actual DTS, which is the actual truck stop average price across the U.S. Still moving down, slightly down to, let's say, $4.71 a gallon. Still much higher than where I wish it was today, but it's the result from our rack prices that increased, but they are continuing to decline as well. And this spread is getting a little bit bigger, and as long as this spread is increasing, then these prices should continue to go down. The problem was before is the spread actually closed the gap as these rack prices increased, which eventually, after we got down below $1.10 a gallon, the fuel station owners started pushing their prices up. And here we went up from about $4.67 up to a little over $4.72, and then now we've started kind of trend back down. Now, this is important because, Anthony, this is one of the biggest expenses for truck drivers. Now, large fleets have the advantage of having a fuel surcharge, so they're charging their customers based on fuel being this price, but they're buying near this price, so they can actually profit when this gap gets really big. But your owner operators, your small companies, they're having to pay full price at the pump. So this is really a big burden on them. They really need to kind of go in and find where the cheapest diesel fuel prices are. So here on our next chart, we'll bring up actually a map Anthony, I've taken our DTS prices and thrown them up on a map. Now, I didn't do 3D, but I could have put volumes or something else behind it. But as you see here, of course, Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, these are the areas that have the cheapest diesel fuel, the lighter colors. As you get further away, you see the blue starts to darken. That's showing you where the diesel fuel prices are going up. So if you're running some lanes, maybe out of Florida up to New Jersey or something, as you can see, Florida's a little bit darker blue, and New Jersey and Pennsylvania, they're darker blue. So maybe somewhere through here in the Carolinas, you can jump in and find a good spot where you could fuel in both directions and be buying that diesel fuel prices at a cheaper rate versus fueling when you fill up, or fueling when you load, or fueling when you unload. You might be paying a little bit more. This will add up, Anthony. At the end of the year, it could be $4,000 or $5,000 in extra expenses.
That's impressive. Definitely something that's meaningful for those smaller operators, owner-operators, and smaller operations.
Yeah, that's a few truck payments, Anthony. Right. All right, we'll go and jump over here to spot rates right quick. Here we're looking at the NTI. Again, the NTI bounced back up just a little bit today. It's 240, or yesterday, it's 246. This was a result here, end of the week. And then, of course, we got into Monday and Tuesday, which was the end of the month. So we saw a little bit of response, but still overall, the trend is still moving down. So our average is down to 250. It's been one of our lowest averages that we've ever seen with the NTI. So not looking good for spot rates right now. Again, if you're a small carrier or really any carrier at this point, it's best to reduce your exposure to the spot market right now and try to jump on those contracted rates.
Insightful as always, Donnie. Thank you for this update. We'll check in with you again. Right now, we're going to head back to Kaylee Nix with our next guest.
So much for joining us this morning and for that carrier update. Right now, we're going to welcome in our next live guest, and we've got Mark Solomon, one of our writers here at FreightWaves, who is always hot on the coverage of FedEx and UPS, talking a little bit about labor updates, and we've got some Q4 earnings from UPS as well. Mark, thanks for being here.
Hello, how are you?
Doing pretty good. Let's go ahead and start off on the UPS side of things. We've got Q4 earnings being released by them. Anything that stuck out to you in how they're doing for the fourth quarter of 2022?
UPS did fine, all things considered. There was macro softness, particularly internationally, that they dealt with. Domestic was okay. They did. Yeah, the business was okay, not great, but they hung in there. UPS has developed two scenarios for 2023. One, a base case, which is moderate recession in the U.S., if it even gets there, with a modest recovery in the second half. The other is maybe a more severe or more pronounced decline where their volumes will be down for the entire year. The thing about UPS that makes them what they are is that they are tremendously resilient. They are nimble. They can, whatever happens, whatever environment they're in, they know how to pivot and they know how to make money and execute, which is the hallmark of this company. And we saw it in the Q4 results. It was a difficult quarter for a lot of people, a lot of companies, but they hung in there, and most analysts were positive on not only on the results, but on the outlook for 2023.
And Mark, as you mentioned, they definitely know how to weather a storm. One of the big things for UPS, of course, is their partnerships. One of the biggest ones, of course, being Amazon. Were there any mentions or any talks around Amazon?
There were, Anthony. Amazon represents a little over 11% of UPS's revenue. It's the largest customer individual customer UPS has. That percentage declined very modestly compared to 2021. Carol Tomei, the CEO of UPS, said that if it wasn't for some currency headwinds, the percentage of revenue would have declined further. That said, UPS is continuing with its strategy of keeping the Amazon business that it considers profitable and high margin, and effectively telling Amazon, the business that we don't want, you handle. And that hasn't changed. Again, I think what is happening is UPS is gaining more small to mid-sized customers. That is serving to offset any revenue impact of less Amazon business.
So, Mark, obviously the kind of big cloud hanging over UPS right now is the negotiations with the Teamsters union going on. We've got about 6 months before the deadline for that contract being inked. How have negotiations started so far at the beginning of the year, and what's that looking like? Hopeful or not so hopeful going into the start of the year?
Well, Kaylee, negotiations have not begun. They're expected to begin later than usual. There will be a lot of noise surrounding the negotiations, much of it coming from the Teamsters. Carol Tomé was very, very bullish on reaching an agreement well before the July 31st expiration date of the contract. She believes that the two sides are not far apart, and that with a few tweaks, and that's the word she used, they can achieve a contract that wins for the Teamsters, wins for UPS employees, and wins for UPS customers. That remains to be seen. The Teamsters did not comment on her remarks, but she was very optimistic on the conference call yesterday with analysts that a deal could be reached, a satisfactory deal at least, by the July 31st expiration date.
Mark, shifting gears here, speaking about FedEx, you also put out a story about that not too long ago. Can you tell us about what's going on with their tier system?
Okay. FedEx Ground, which is the ground delivery unit of FedEx, has rolled out I could call it an Olympic medal grading system for its driver contractors. FedEx Ground operates through a network of contractors who in turn hire, fire drivers and assign them routes and what have you. I mean, these are not FedEx Ground employees. They are contractors. The company has, for years, run evaluations of contractors based on contractor safety performance and their service levels. What they've done now is added a third metric, which is efficiency. And this is very important in the sort of slowed down environment that we're in right now. Obviously, FedEx Ground wants its contractors to operate efficiently as well as safely and with good customer service. They will assign by what they consider underperforming contractors a bronze medal status. This means that those routes that those contractors had will be open for bidding, meaning they will no longer be exclusive to that contractor. Once you open the process for bidding, the incumbent contractor runs the risk of losing its business to a company that's applied for these routes that FedEx Ground believes it offers a superior value proposition. The silver tier, the middle tier, there's no reward necessarily or no punishment. It's just status quo. We do not know at this point what the gold tier entails. Clearly, those are the top performing contractors in all three metrics in FedEx Ground's eyes. Again, this is relatively new, but the efficiency metric is something that's becoming very important to FedEx Ground in the operating environment we're in.
Definitely seems like a very interesting and intricate way with that tier system. Mark, thanks so much for joining us this morning. If people want to reach out, get in touch with you, how can they do that?
msolomon@freightwaves.com. That's my company email, and feel free to contact me with comments, questions, feedback of any sort.
Awesome, Mark. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, guys.
Right now, we're going to head back over to the wall because we have Kaylee Nix with our next weather update.
Right, Anthony, thank you for that. And we are moving back down to the deep south where we're talking about some continued rounds of heavy rainfall on the warm side of that winter storm. With more moisture moving in off of the Gulf Coast, we've got about another day of soaking going on for southern Louisiana. Let's check it out in Sonar Critical Events right now. This is our forecast rainfall day 1 through day 3. So this is again today through Friday. It's very interesting to watch kind of the juxtaposition of this rain with that winter weather, because right in the northern parts, northern central Louisiana, I-20 into I-49, where the axis of heaviest rainfall is, we've got flood watches in place. And then just to the east and to the north, we've got ice storm warnings and winter weather advisories, that is. So this really shows you just how sharp that line between freezing precipitation and water precipitation really is, liquid precipitation really is. Flood watches here, and then just on the other side of the state line, winter storm warnings and ice storm warnings. Very interesting to say the least. With that, we're expecting about another 1.5 to 2 inches of rainfall, specifically from Alexandria up towards the Vicksburg, Mississippi area. But I-20 going to see the majority of those impacts. So from Shreveport eastward through Monroe, Louisiana, and then into the Mississippi state line. Still, again, continuing some heavy rainfall through central Mississippi up into Alabama, but that's going to taper off today and into tonight. What we're really going to be watching is that heaviest rain all the way through south central Louisiana up to the Mississippi border. Further out towards the east, we're expecting, again, some heavier rainfall through central Georgia and South Carolina. All of these folks are sitting on that warm side. Again, the coldest temperatures, that freezing line is going to be honestly cutting right here through Freight Alley is what we're expecting to see. So with that, all of the precipitation falling here in the deep south going to be liquid. Lots of rain already for the last few weeks, so we are watching some minor creek and stream flooding going on. Most of the roadways should be okay, just besides being wet. But as always, if you come across any roadways that are flooded or you can't see necessarily where you're going, don't drive through that flooded water because you never know what's going on with the road underneath it. We'll take one final check of weather before we're done here for the day. Right now, we'll take a quick break and be right back. The 2023 Freight Tech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest Freight Tech news at FreightWaves.com.
What does this have to do with freight? Well, I'm glad you asked. People are wondering what's going to happen with inflation. Is there going to be hyperinflation? When is hyperinflation going to be here? When is there going to be inflation? What's going to happen with inflation? Inflation, inflation, inflation. This is the sexiest topic within the economy right now.
Welcome to Drilling Deep. I'm your host, John Kingston. Drilling Deep is the place where we talk about oil and we talk about diesel, and you have to drill to get oil and you have to get oil to make diesel, so that's why we call it Drilling Deep. Drilling Deep drops every Friday on FreightWaves TV and all available podcast platforms.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now. It's Wednesday, which means that it is time to put somebody in the hot seat. Today, we've got the queen of ocean shipping, Lauren Began, with us. Let's see how she answers to your top 10 hot questions.
Welcome in again to the hot seat, where we prepare some unsuspecting victim for 10 questions they have to answer. And joining us today, the maritime professor herself, Lauren Began, joining us. How are you, Lauren?
Hi, so great to be here. Thanks for having me. Doing great. How are you, Bill?
I'm doing well. We've got 10 questions here for you. I need answers to all 10. Are you ready?
I think so. Here we go.
Right. First one. Probably always the same, but nevertheless, what is the problem? What is the number one problem your company or organization is trying to solve?
So, I often say this. So I have two companies now, right? So I have Squall Strategies, which is my legal solutions, basically law firm. And then I created a second company called the Maritime Professor because I was finding a lot of people didn't necessarily have legal questions or didn't need to retain me as a lawyer, but they wanted to know more about ocean shipping. And so that's what I try to solve, is really breaking down those silos between the two. We were finding, especially when congestion was hitting the ports were backing up, but then the truckers maybe didn't know, or the shippers didn't know how to get their stuff. They just didn't understand it. So that's what I want to break down those silos,
That's a great initiative to take on. All right, number two, I'm going to throw a little bit of a hard one at you. You can take a second to think if you'd like. If you could add one person to a regulatory agency in the maritime industry, who maybe not in the maritime, may not be in the maritime industry now, who would you want to see enacting laws, writing legislation, and so forth?
I think it's okay to say Dr. Sal Mercogliano. I would like to see Dr. Sal Mercogliano join one of the federal regulatory agencies. So I was down in DC for quite a bit. I love it down there. It's such a fun town. Certainly a fun town to be young in. Maybe one day I'll pursue that myself. I'd love to be an FMC commissioner one day. I'm putting it out there into the universe. But right now, Dr. Sal Mercogliano, 100%. Okay. I hope that's okay to say.
That's fair. I'm sure he would run screaming, but we'll throw that one by him. Number three.
We'll start a whole commission to get him to do it.
Number three, you're driving along, you hit your gas station, you got to fill up. What is your food, drink, gas station combo on the go?
Oh, good question. So up here in New England, it would have to be a Mary Lou's iced coffee. And I know Dooner's often put that out there. Do you do Dunkin' or do you do Mary Lou's? So I'm a Mary Lou's person. But I mean, if you're traveling, you're not really probably close to your house. And I'm a Midwesterner by breeding, I guess. I grew up in Michigan. So I would have to go with a Diet Wild Cherry Pepsi. And one of those little cheese trays. Okay. Because any good Midwesterner, so Traverse City, Michigan's where I'm from. We are the cherry capital of the world. 75% of the world's tart cherries come from the Traverse City area. Even though Washington State claims to be the cherry area, it's Michigan. So the wild cherry Pepsi, right? And then you can't go wrong with cheese.
Gotcha. All right, number four. Obviously, the ILWU negotiations are 6 months past their deadline. Gut feeling, how's this going to end? All right. Number five, one person, living or dead, in the freight industry that you like to pick your brain at by having dinner with them, and you can't say Sal Mercogliano.
Okay. Well, we chat anyway, so I'm good there. I think I would go with Malcolm McLean, kind of the father of the box. He really revolutionized just everything that has to do with modern day shipping. He was a trucker, right? And to kind of, talk about somebody who's breaking down those silos, especially if he were still alive today, I'd be interested to see his take on the kind of gatekeeping of information that may sometimes happen, or just that siloing of the information, how to solve that.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Number six, as a lawyer, what is the one issue that you see popping up more and more that people are having difficulty with, or they're just running into, or this is the area that causes the most trouble? What is it?
Yeah, from the past 2 years, detention demurrage, hands down. That's what I work a lot with the shippers on, is detention demurrage, and trying to kind of figure out what was appropriately assessed and what was maybe inappropriately under, and I say inappropriately, under FMC kind of nuances and certainly statements and regulatory guidance that they've released.
Okay. And then in a possibly related question, taking a look at the laws and regulations around maritime shipping, what is one that you'd like to change?
Interesting.
Seeing as you'd like to be in Washington at some point.
Yeah, this not so difficult. One of the biggest things about ocean alliances that I think was a big miss and continues to be a big miss is the FMC doesn't have the ability to deny the creation of ocean alliances. And don't get me wrong, I actually do like ocean alliances. I think that they serve a big purpose. I think that they are an overall net win for the shipping community. They provide a lot of benefits and service and routes, all that. But the FMC, if somebody were to come to them with an agreement that has 80% market share in it, they can't just outright deny it. They have to file an injunction in court to stop them. And they have to do that within 45 days of the filing of the agreement. OSRA didn't touch on that, where Congressman kept saying, we're going to be going after the alliances. Wouldn't that be such an easy thing to put in that the FMC can actually deny it in-house instead of having to take it to court?
That's a great idea there as well. Number 8, what is the best book that you've read that has helped you in the freight industry, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a freight-centric book?
Sure. I would probably say The Business of Shipping. I had never heard of the Federal Maritime Commission up until that point, and luckily still had that book when I applied there, because like we know, I worked at the Federal Maritime Commission. They actually mentioned it. Most shipping books don't even mention the Federal Maritime Commission. So it helped me to do some reading up on the agency before I got there.
All right, number 9, I think that I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it anyway. You obviously have a podcast, a great podcast, which people can tune into. But I want to ask you, if you had a show, who would your co-host be? Matt Leffler, Sal Mercogliano, or somebody else?
Oh, great question. So when I first started, Matt and I dabbled in being co-hosts, and he was the surface transport guy and I was the ocean transport girl. And so it was so fun. It was great. But Sal's so maritime, and I'm a maritime person, right? So, you know what? I'm going to say you, Bill. You and I should do.
Oh, come on.
You and I should do a joint podcast.
I'm flattered. I'm very flattered. Thank you for
you can bring in the trucking element.
I'm not sure how much that would add to the conversation, since I'm not the expert.
I think more than you know.
Okay, number 10, final question, always the same one. Fill in the blank. Freight is blank.
Freight is everywhere. I'm sure everybody says that, but freight is life, freight is everything. Freight is sustainability and the lifestyle that we all enjoy, right? 90% of everything comes by ocean shipping, but arguably 100% of everything comes by truck, and probably 2% of society knows that.
Great answer there as well. Lauren Began, the maritime professor, you are off the hot seat.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Hey everybody, this is Thomas Watson, enterprise trucking carrier expert here at FreightWaves, telling you about my show, Loaded and Rolling. Now, it involves trucking topics for large carriers and even small ones that wish to be large. Anything that impacts trucking, you can get it there. You can catch us every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern on tv.freightwaves.com. We do it live.
When guests come to an event like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June. And welcome back to FreightWaves Now. It's time for one final check of the weather this morning before we get out of here. As we look back into Texas and Oklahoma, we've got more wintry precipitation filling in those dry slots that had formed earlier between the Dallas-Fort Worth metro and Austin. So as I said earlier, basically Texas is shut down right now. The entire road system, the interstate system is completely shut down. Places all the way from the Dallas-Fort Worth metro into Austin, into Waco. We're seeing significant icing on roads and bridges, significant icing on trees and power lines, to the point where we're starting to see some power outages as well. Situation is continuing to deteriorate and will actually get worse today before it gets better tomorrow afternoon. Let's check it out in Sonar Critical Events. We can see we've got the radar still turned on, and you can see that there's more precipitation filtering into this little dry slot that had formed between Dallas and Waco. And right now, this is filling in not just with some snow in the upper levels, but now freezing rain that is reaching the ground. So because of this, we do have ice storm warnings in place for the Dallas-Fort Worth metro that extends westward on I-20 between Dallas and Abilene, and then up to the north through Denton up to the Oklahoma border. With this, we're expecting about another 1/4 to a 1/2 inch of total ice accumulation, and it only takes about 1/3 of an inch to a 1/2 inch to cause some major issues on trees and power lines, like those power outages and even some snapping tree branches. Down south towards Austin, they've now had about 12 hours of solid ice accumulation, and they're up just under 3/4 of an inch of total ice accumulation. We've got some photos that we found on Twitter earlier this morning of this ice accumulation going on in Austin, and we can see that there is a pretty decent amount on some of those branches. If we can get those photos pulled up, folks all the way from South Austin up through even the northern parts of San Antonio towards College Station, even some places in Houston now seeing some icy conditions. So really overall, today is not a good day to leave the house, not a good day to leave the office. Just stay inside, stay safe here. We're not expecting this again to start winding down until tonight into the mid parts of tomorrow. That's it for your weather today. We'll continue to cover it as we move throughout the rest of your week. Right now, we'll toss things back over to Isaiah.
Welcome into Social Roundabout, everyone. I'm Isaiah Buchanan, and big news this morning. Tom Brady has announced that he is stepping away from the game of football. He posted a video on his Twitter page saying that he is retiring for good. Now, he said for good because he also retired last year and then came back 40-something days later. So he is officially done with the game of football, but his career has been legendary. I mean, listen to some of these stats. He ranks first in all of these categories: 7 Super Bowls, 5 Super Bowl MVPs, 3 MVPs. He's number 1 in passing yards in NFL history with 89,214. Number 1 in regular season touchdowns with 649. Number 1 in passing yards in the playoffs with 13,000. And number 1 with passing touchdowns in the playoffs with 88. So Tom Brady has had a very legendary and rare career. But you know what also else is very rare? How about a comet that has not come close to the Earth, this close to the Earth in 50,000 years. So there's gonna be a comet tonight that will pass, like I said, about 26 million miles away from the Earth. And to put that into perspective, that's about 100 times the distance of the Earth to the Moon, and only about 28% of the distance from the Earth to the Sun. With it still being that far away, scientists are saying that you still should be able to see this with the naked eye. So if you're in the right conditions, so as Kaylee's talked about all day with people out in the Midwest, you're probably not going to be able to see it just because of those stormy conditions. But it will be most visible right around 6:50 this evening Eastern time. So if you are able to get out there and see that, go look at it. It's something that hasn't happened for about 50,000 years, and that's really cool. That's all I have for this edition of the Social Roundabout right now. I'm going to toss things back over to Kaylee Nix for our roundtable.
All right, Isaiah, thank you for that, and welcome into today's Roundtable Talk. A little bit earlier, we heard from John Gallagher, our Washington correspondent, about the FMCSA advanced notice of proposed rulemaking about new regulations for Level 4 and Level 5 autonomous trucks. To break it down a little bit more, we've got our armchair attorney, Matthew Leffler, joining us, and Finch Fulton, who is Vice President of Strategy and Innovation at Locomation. Guys, thank you both so much for being here today. Obviously, now seeing the intention from the FMCSA to put forward more rules around Level 4, Level 5 high-level autonomy, it's going to be a little interesting out there. Matt, we're going to start with you. This is an advanced notice of proposed rulemaking, so like step number one in a very lengthy process to get these rules made. Where do we go now on a step-by-step basis after the FMCSA announces this advanced notice?
Yeah, so the FMCSA is telling the industry, hey, there ought to be a law, there ought to be some regulations, and we need you to participate before we even propose anything. Once this advance notice is completed, the FMCSA will put out a proposed rule. That proposed rule will have a period for industry and experts and individuals to comment on what they're looking to put in place. And there's a lot to be said on level 4 and level 5 automation. This is the type of automation that doesn't have a human being in the truck. This is incredible. And as this thing goes, it starts slow, but it goes faster. Once that proposed rule is out there and the comments are done, you'll have the final rule that'll go out by the FMCSA, generally with the buy-in from all of the industry groups that are interested in this thing. Once that final rule is in place, regulation starts, and we will start seeing likely level 4 and level 5 vehicles on our highways moving our freight, and it is going to be remarkable. So often, technology outpaces our ability to regulate it, but in this circumstance, the FMCSA is getting ahead of level 4 and level 5 automation.
I think that's super interesting to think about, right? Because it makes sense from a public perception. I think that people feel a lot safer knowing that there are level 4 and level 5 autonomous trucks, knowing that there are in place regulations instead of having to kind of build the truck as it's rolling down the highway, right? To use the metaphor. Finch, talking about you, now that we've seen this advanced notice of proposed rulemaking, there's 3 key aspects that the FMCSA is going to focus on: is notification of use, is of the remote control, and is of safety and reporting. What was your initial reaction to this notice, and what are you thinking so far after reading through it?
So there is nothing generally controversial about what they put in there. The thing that I think you have to go back and understand is this is not just an advance notice of proposed rulemaking. This is a supplemental advance notice of proposed rulemaking, which is not common. What it does is it goes back 4 years ago when we asked these questions the first time, when I was leading the policy shop at USDOT, and says, well, we're going to ask these questions again, and now we're going to ask a few more questions. So what this is actually is delay, because back when I was at DOT, we were very close to putting out the notice of proposed rulemaking, what Matthew mentioned is before the final rule. So FMCSA is actually using a procedural aspect to delay the adoption of these rules. And there's a very obvious reason. One, while union members, 3/4 of union members support the development and testing of automated vehicles in the US, the Teamsters fundamentally oppose it. So those that make the vehicles support it, those that drive the vehicles don't, because they don't know what that means for their future. They care about their number of members and their members' pensions. So fundamentally, politically, the Teamsters oppose any movement forward on automated vehicle rulemakings, and that's what this represents. The new questions aren't really fundamentally that important. They ask for how many vehicles do you plan to deploy? How many vehicles do you expect to deploy in the future? That's all publicly reported stuff. You can go to safer.com and see how many are on the roads. That's an FMCSA website. There's a new ACT report that talks about how much you expect, how many of these you expect to see on the road in the future. And then all these other things are things that industry doesn't have a problem with, and they've been proactively providing FMCSA this information. So this is not a step forward. This is a sidestep to delay the question and hopefully, in my mind, push this off until there's next administration 2 years from now, or I should say after the election for the next administration. So this is a delay.
So I think that's a really interesting point that you bring up, knowing that the current presidential administration is very pro-labor and very pro-union. Do you think that this is kind of an indication that maybe in the FMCSA's viewpoint, there is maybe going to be a change in administration and thus a change in feelings towards the workforce going forward? Or is it more of just kind of they don't want to handle it, they don't really know?
No, this administration intends to come back for a second term. But if you were Secretary Buttigieg, the former winner of the Iowa caucuses, you're looking at your political future, and you don't really want to lead forward with antagonizing the Teamsters, who have been a key supporter of you. So this is a way for them to push it off, to try and make time, and to try not to deal with it now. So they don't want to antagonize organized labor going into a new election. So this is just an easy way to delay and ask questions that could have easily been asked while moving this rulemaking forward through an NPRM. So I think they intend to stay for a second term, but this is one of those issues where they can worry about it in the future instead of dealing with it today for political reasons.
So Matt, going back to you for the actual, so the delayed rulemaking or the supplemental, as Finch called it now, the process obviously goes to the public comment period for 45 days. And then if that comes back and then they adjust it and then down the road, as we mentioned, let's talk a little bit about the actual content of this. From a regulation standpoint, what do you think are some of the most important pieces that federal lawmakers will be looking to potentially regulate?
We need to understand the safety aspect of autonomous vehicles. Every single day, commercial vehicle operators do pre and post-trip inspections. That's how you find out what's going on with your asset. The robots, the technology to inspect themselves is not very well understood. And how would you inspect trailing assets, for example? So what we want to see, we know that the autonomous vehicles will be safer over time, but what is the level of training required for the remote operators or the remote assistants? I think this is a far more deep question as to how we expect our supply chain to function. The maintenance of our industry today is not great. We have 1 in 5 commercial vehicles or fail inspections on international road check. When you move into this pathway of robotics, how do you inspect and monitor that equipment? How is that data secured and transmitted to law enforcement officials? And at the end of the day, we talk about this all the time. The biggest cost in trucking is fuel and labor. And so even if there is this element of the Teamsters or organized labor opposing this, every over-the-road truck driver has the middle mile as part of their main core business. And this is the aspect of how the automation will likely come into fruition in this middle mile, perhaps travel center to travel center. So this starts slow. The regulatory process is methodical, but when it's all said and done, level 4 and level 5 are coming. How we maintain those, inspect those, and train people to monitor them or potentially remotely control them is incredibly important. And that is exactly what this supplemental is all about, is what do we really need to do? What should we put in place today to make sure that when these things become operational at scale, they will be safe, and then we'll have confidence that the assets themselves are inspected periodically. Is it once a year? Is it 4 times a year? That's a really important question that we're going to have to wrestle with as the FMCSA continues to put out this information.
So, Finch,
I would say Matthew's right.
Sorry, go ahead.
But the thing I want to add is industry has already worked with law enforcement and state regulators and the FMCSA itself to answer the questions around enhanced pre-trip inspection that would be appropriate for autonomous vehicles and autonomous trucks. The Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance is the forum where this has come together. There's been workshops. This has been published. These answers are out there and can be progressed. So you don't have to go back and ask the questions. The answers are there, and FMCSA knows this because they participated in it. So again, this is delay. We have a lot of the answers to these questions. Industry is coming together and working collaboratively, not even pushing each other out. Industry is all together moving this forward. So what is it that we're waiting for?
That's a really good question to ask. Like, why is the reason for the delay? And Finch, obviously you have kind of this inside look because you worked with the DOT before, and a lot of the other autonomous companies also have leadership representation from folks who are former FMCSA members or have worked on the governmental side of things, which makes their strategy going into this very kind of open-minded or makes it illuminated, I guess I would call it, right? They have this insider knowledge. Do you think that there are going to be now strategy changes knowing that this supplemental proposed rulemaking is on paper from the autonomous companies? Or do you think that they're just going to keep continuing chugging along because they've participated, they've done what they're supposed to do already?
I think industry will move forward with what's known as alternative means of compliance. So the main barriers to removing your human driver from a vehicle have to do with the need to place out warning markers. If somebody else hits your truck, you still have to pull over to the side of the road and put out warning markers at 4 and 40 paces around the truck. And you have to do it differently if you're on a hill or a curve. We talked about inspections. So you have to have this enhanced pre-trip inspection to make sure that everything is working fundamentally as it is intended to, and even basics like your trailer that you probably don't own is all up to code and up to regulations. And then there's some minor things like the ability to cross railroad tracks and things like that are unintended barriers. But these are things, and the ability to work with state law enforcement are keys to being able to unlock this. I think industry will move forward with these alternative means of compliance. And so what this means is they won't have the certainty that a rule provides, but they will have ways to deploy in commercial operations before these rules are finalized. And frankly, industry will probably use that information to better inform FMCSA's approach in the first place.
So final question.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say this does not provide industry the certainty it needs to move forward, and they'll have to operate by exception instead of by following rules that have been vetted and are as well understood. The exceptions will still have to go out for public comment as well.
So then final questions for both of you guys, and Matt, we'll start with you. Obviously, we're going to be like prognosticating a little bit, thinking about what the public is going to say in this public comment period. Is there any type of reaction that either of you are expecting to see out of this and actually now will get relayed back to the FMCSA? Matt, start with you first.
I don't think there's going to be a lot of surprises as to what the comments are going to be from the general public or for industry. We've been talking about automation for years and years and years. And the thing that people are going to always ask is it going to be safe and will it reduce overall trucking jobs? Those are the two real fundamental questions. And as long as Americans want cheap goods, this is the pathway to achieve those. Last year, we were talking about 19-year-olds driving interstate with the apprenticeship program. There is a need for drivers, whether this is a retention issue or this is an issue of not having enough drivers in the pool. But ultimately, this is going to happen. Automation is coming. And our chance to comment now is happening. And what I also kind of note back is the previous rule that came out, there was less than 300 comments, things like 120, 130. So we really do want industry to participate and talk about this. And the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance has their own metrics that we talked about earlier. It's in this proposal in terms of what they're looking to understand. So if you're passionate about maintenance and you're passionate about supply chain, now is the time to comment. These things are coming, and whether you participate or not doesn't matter. They will be here.
Finch, same thoughts?
Yeah, so it's interesting because as you look at this and look at what the potential for this technology means for the future truck driver, we all know truck driving is the fourth most dangerous job in the country, but also for any profession, truck drivers are in the top 5 in terms of suicide rates. So the status quo is not okay. By utilizing autonomous vehicle technology, we're able to move to a hub-to-hub center, which can get truck drivers working these local routes. They can get home every day. They can still be paid a great wage, and you can address the quality of life impacts that lead these truck drivers that make less than they thought they were going to make, that have so much of their time wasted in detention time waiting for their loads. You remove these inefficiencies that are placed on the truck driver today. You improve their quality of life. You get them home to their families every day. And ultimately, what we've seen with innovations in logistics is this leads to more jobs, more tangential, secondary, and tertiary jobs that come because you have greater efficiencies in the systems. And USDOT studies have shown that with automation, we expect an increase in the number of jobs that come from this and no significant decrease, especially to truck drivers today, in the number of trucking jobs available. So you can use this technology to improve the trucking jobs that are out there, to improve the quality of life, and ultimately make our overall supply chain more efficient and work better for everybody. There's a way to do this with this technology.
All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us for this roundtable. Super interesting, and it's going to be very fascinating to watch where this goes. We'll talk to you guys soon, I'm sure, about it as it continues. Right now, we're going to toss things back over to Anthony and Donnie for our final carrier update.
Hello, and welcome to our final carrier update of the morning. Donnie, I love what I'm seeing right here.
Well, so when we go to lanes today, I try to find some lanes that are going to the best paying lanes, over $3 a mile. And it's been getting a lot more difficult. But the easy go-to, if you want over $3 a mile, delivering to the Northeast. So I'm going to check out some of these lanes that are the higher paying lanes. Harrisburg to Baldwin, or to Boston, or you could have something like Harrisburg to Buffalo as well. But rates are going down. We see here since the first of the year, the first week after the first of the year, we see rates going down, but it's still $4.20 a mile. Now it's a 387-mile run. This could be considered a pretty long run in the Northeast because the traffic is, the population is a lot more dense, a lot more traffic. It's hard to get 400 miles in the Northeast. This lane right here, if I was leaving, Harrisburg, PA, I might want to be leaving at 5 o'clock in the morning to get on the way before that, 8 o'clock, traffic starts to build up throughout the Northeast. So difficult lane, but these are the higher paying lanes. Nobody wants to really run them. Now, back in the day, coming back from Boston was $1 a mile. I'm talking 4, 5, 6 years ago. We hit a little double arrows there, reverse this lane, coming back out of Boston back to Harrisburg. It's still $3.03. So you can average pretty good there and back on this lane. You've got to time it very well. Right. You got to keep that truck moving. There's a lot of niche companies that run lanes just like this, but you can still jump in there and run these on spot rates. Maybe if you can find a lane, Boston back to Harrisburg, that's on contract, you can return your truck at the high rate back to Boston, but I would say it's still going to be pretty difficult. All right, next lane here, let's jump out to the West Coast. Los Angeles to Las Vegas. Again, it's about a 270-mile run, so not a long run. This might be one that you want to run out, deliver, maybe drop and hook, grab a load, and try to get back to LA that evening if you can hurry and make that 525-mile round trip a one-day run. But coming out of California, $3.71 a mile. As you saw on my DTS map with the diesel fuel, Southern California has some of the highest fuel. So this could be a difficult run, but you can still make money on this run even though fuel is that high. You need lanes like this. The problem with this lane is when we hit our little double arrows there and bring it back from Las Vegas, going back to Los Angeles, you're at $2.16 a mile. You're still getting a pretty good average. So a doable lane, it's going to be tight. You probably need to cut this in a one-day trip to make this a profitable lane. Let's try to get one more in. We only got 20 seconds left here. Atlanta to Tampa. Again, go where nobody wants to go. And then you'll find these rates, $3.13 in the Southeast. This is pretty strong. But coming back out of Tampa, I'll tell you right now, it's not going to be much better than $1.32. So again, for almost a 500-mile run in the Southeast, you can average pretty good on this lane and still be profitable because you're going to be paying the lower fuel prices.
Awesome, Donnie. I love the track dashboard. Definitely can see where you can make your money. And thank you so much for the insights all this morning. Right now, we're going to toss over to Kaylee Nix with our final look at today's headlines.
And thanks, guys. Here's one final look at what's making headlines on FreightWaves.com. Ocean Network Express said it saw a significant deterioration in profit for its fiscal year 2022 third quarter, with a 50% drop quarter over quarter. Q3 profits were $2.76 billion, down from $5.52 the quarter prior, and down $2.12 billion year over year. The group blamed the dive on the rapid reduction in a short-term freight market, cited a demand decrease in east to west trade because of elevated inventory levels in North America. Cargo volume from Asia to North America, for one, was down 19% year over year in October and November. FedEx has announced e-commerce shipping platform Shippo was awarded a first-of-its-kind platform account with the carrier, a move that will allow Shippo to offer discounted FedEx shipping services to U.S.-based merchants on its platform. The services include offerings under FedEx Ground Economy and FedEx International Connect Plus, which will let the carrier reach more small to mid-market e-com sellers. The companies did not disclose the size of the rate discounts, only that Shippo merchants will receive perks like 24-hour package visibility, insurance coverage up to $100, and the option to use their own custom shipping boxes. And Hapag-Lloyd achieved extraordinarily strong results in 2022, its 175th anniversary year. The German shipping company saw an earnings before taxes and interest of $18.5 billion, a $7.4 billion increase year over year in yearly revenue growth of $10 billion. The carrier said their average freight rate was up 43% year over year to $2,863 per TEU, even though full year transport volume was down slightly to 1.8 million TEUs. And you can find details of these stories and so much more over on FreightWaves.com and our FreightWaves. Give us a like and subscribe if you're watching us live on YouTube, and a follow on social media. And head on over to tv.freightwaves.com to catch more live content for the rest of the day and anything you might have missed. It's Wednesday, which means, so what the truck day?
That means there's What the Truck happening in just about an hour, and that's not going to be it. Kaylee, there's tons more coming up, and while there's so much coming up, you can get registered for our next virtual event while the shows are running.
Absolutely. So head on over to live.freightwaves.com and get registered for that Global Supply Chain Week. A plethora of prizes potentially await you if you get in and registered right now. You could win anything from a set of headphones to a brand new grill for your summer months. I don't know. Check it out. Also coming up today, we've got Point of Sale this afternoon with Sonar, with, rumor has it, Kyle Taylor's back. They're getting the band back together.
I was so excited when I saw Kyle Taylor come back to FreightWaves. So I'm going to be excited for that episode, and for sure tune in, and we'll see you tomorrow morning at 9.
to an event like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make